question, what happens after we die? What happens after we die? So the question, I'm going to see if I can capture. Oh, here we go. If I talk straight into the mic, maybe you can hear me. So our rector covered the question through the lens of the book, C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce, which is really a wonderful lens through which to answer the question, what does life after death look like? And the topic, I think, is really well suited for the season of Lent. We are preparing for Holy Week, we are preparing for the crucifixion and for the resurrection. And of course, we know that the resurrection is our hope for all of us, the resurrection of the dead. And in our world, I think that a lot of us, we tend to avoid the topic of death and dying. Our world has tended to kind of like professionalize it and medicalize it, and we've put the dying process often in hospitals or into hospice facilities. And we've kind of distanced ourselves from it. And maybe you're asking, well, isn't this a really morbid topic? Isn't this just kind of depressing and something that we just kind of have to get through and then we can go on to our daily lives? But actually, the Christian faith asserts and promises us that when we think about our death and when we think about preparing ourselves for what comes next, that actually we can live a more fuller life here and now, as a result of thinking about what comes after. And I think there's no better story than what we heard today in our gospel reading, which is, of course, the story of Lazarus being unbound. Lazarus' resurrection from the dead, kind of this foretaste of what happens to Jesus himself. And I had some thoughts about that, which I'm going to pull up on my phone real quick. So I think really the question that it prepares us for is when we think about preparing for death and we think about what comes next, it also helps us, as I said, live more fully and ask the questions like, well, if I were to die tomorrow, how do I want to live today? What would I regret knowing if I were to die tomorrow? What would I regret not doing? What would I regret? What would I do differently? What would I say to the people I love? What would I change? What would I let go of? And so when we begin to actually think about these questions, it can really transform everything about our life. And of course, we know as Christians that we live our life in the light of the resurrection. This promise that all of us, the living and those who have gone before, will be raised with Jesus and will be raised to this new life in this new creation. So the question for today is, how can we love, is that the question? How can we love our neighbors from the grave? How can we love our neighbors from the other side of the grave? What a great question, right? So how can we? We've got two presenters today who are going to help us answer that question. So, shall I pass it on to you, Susie? All right, Tim's got us first. So our first speaker is Tim Coughlin. I don't have your resume in front of me, so I can't do the wonderful presentation of everything, all of your credentials. But take it away, Tim.
He's known as a parent.
It's a short resume, so you don't have to okay, so we've got two parts to our conversation today. I'm going to talk about giving, and then Sue's going to be spiritual. We thought that would be the best order to proceed in. So we have, Susie and I have been asked to make our presentations on planned giving this morning. And this, of course, is now our last forum in Lent. I will be talking about planning ways to give, and she will be talking about the philanthropy and theology of giving. Okay. So first, I would like to say how much St. Albans means to me and my wife, Laura. We have been regularly attending services at St. Albans for 42 years, along with our 4 children when they were young, of course, no longer. We have both served in various lay positions over the years and have been fortunate to have made many close friends here at St. Albans, which provides a spiritual home for us. We are eternally grateful. An important way in which Lori and I can show our gratefulness is by supporting St. Albans financially. Making our annual stewardship pledge has always been a priority for us. Now, all of us at St. Albans are keenly aware of the financial needs of our church. Together, we have been able to support a full clergy staff over the years, along with supporting office workers and church member volunteers. As a result, we are personally supported by our church with outstanding devotional services, as well as important community educational and gathering activities. And St. Albans is known for ministries outside the church. And that includes both locally, domestically, and even nationally. Now, what is the best way to provide our financial support of St. Albans? My requested role in speaking to you today is to discuss some of the ways in which we might best pledge to fulfill our St. Albans pledge contributions. So I'll start out with the worst. For cash money contributions, there are strict regulations about cash when they are tax deductible for those who do not itemize tax deductions. There is an income tax deduction limit for those who don't itemize of $1,000 annually for an individual and $2,000 if filing jointly. For those who itemize cash deductions, cash contributions account for only 0.5% of adjusted gross income. That's all that is tax deductible. But here comes some good news. The tax limits on check contributions that you write to qualified IRS 501c3 nonprofits, religious organizations like St. Albans, and government agencies are much greater. Qualified checks up to 60% of adjusted gross income are generally deductible from taxable income. For qualified tax deduction check contributions, be aware that copies of the checks or statements of the banks or credit cards showing the contributions must be kept so you can prove them all if you're asked by the IRS agents. Anyway, there are other forms of contributions which are tax advantaged. One form is donating appreciated stock, which would be subject to capital gains taxes if sold. For the donors, they get the full donation value of the gifted appreciated stock without selling the stock and having to pay capital gains taxes. St. Albans receives the full value of the donated appreciated stock, and then it can sell it and then put it to the church use. An even greater gift tax advantage may come from donating required minimum distributions from individual retirement accounts known as IRAs. I use the word required minimum distributions because withdrawals from IRAs should not be taken before they are required by law. Until then, do not take make contributions to IRAs let their investments grow untaxed until distributions are required. That begins at age 73, or earlier when an IRA is inherited. But if you're donating your minimum required distribution to the church, no tax. If you take the cash from your required minimum distribution, guess what? You don't pay for it. All right. If you have any questions about charitable giving, please seek advice from your tax certified public accountant, who will help you determine the most effective tax saving method to make your own charitable contributions. That's what Lori and I do. So, that's brief, isn't it? These are my comments about ways to contribute to St. Albans. I hope they've been helpful in ways that we can best make our donations in gratitude to all that we receive from our church. And now, I'm looking forward to Susie Mink's comments about the philanthropy and theology of giving. That's probably the most important. Susie?
This way, because I will wag the microphone if I hold it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Stay right there.
Don't move, which is not a good thing for me to stay still. Have you known me to stay still very long? I've been hanging out here for about 28 years, and St. Albans is truly my spiritual home. I've been in the world of philanthropy for much longer than that, including like 18 over at that big church next door. But in that context, I had the privilege of working with some people in this room who were the most extraordinary fundraising volunteers or other volunteers at that place. And I want to thank them because they got me in my youth when I was probably much more aggressive and less refined than I am today. Well, Tim addressed the options for fulfilling your pledge financially. I want to think with you today about long-term giving. I admit I'm a little daunted by the title of the session, and I will repeat it. Thank you, Bertie, if you're watching. We'll reflect on what it means to love your neighbor from the other side of the great beyond. I'm not there yet, so if I try to reflect on this, know I'll do my best, Bertie, and what you hope will happen today.
Can you please get the fucking child away from me? This is a heinous crime. You don't step with it, and I agree with you. Boy children, this is what fucking gross.
Thank you. As we think about estate planning and legacy giving in St. Albans, let's revisit our history a little bit. In 1817, Joseph Nurse bought the land on which we sit today. And he renamed that land Mount Alban. Not Mount St. Alban, but Mount Alban. One of his 11 children was a young woman named Phoebe. As Ruth Klein noted in the history of St. Albans Church, and I quote, "After Phoebe Nurse died, a box was found among her effects containing $40 in gold and a note reading, to be given to the Reverend Mr. Tenbrook as the beginning of a fund for a free church on Mount Alban." That was the beginning of our history. To honor that original request that led to the founding of St. Albans, in 1966, the Phoebe Nurse Legacy Society was created here to help fund a mission and ministry through planned giving. As St. Albans has been blessed with generosity over the years, think about the Diana Smith Fund, the Memorial Lecture Fund, so well managed by our friends. These have sustained us through the years. Over the last 10 years, we've received multiple, in many cases, unannounced requests, mostly unrestricted, that have given us a lot more flexibility to manage what we have to manage, or need or want to manage in our mission and ministry. Again, some of those were a surprise, mostly unrestricted. I spend most of my professional time working with people as they are making decisions about using their assets to help their families and organizations they care about deeply. It is truly about finding what is in their heart and what matters most to them, and much less about what is happening in their pocketbook. And I would say in those early days, I was all about the pocketbook. That's not true anymore. As some people here know, I act fairly aggressively. But I hope what I do in that work, and I hope you will think about with me today, is to determine with them what they hope will be their philanthropic legacy. It's asking them and you and me key questions. What really matters to you? Outside of your family and closest friends, what institution or institutions have found the most profound impact on your life? Secondarily is indeed the financial side, because that's always something we care about, we actually worry about. But in the long run, what has really mattered to you? And as you do that, how would you rank them? Where would you rank those things for yourselves as you think about your long-term planning? Last week I was doing my job and I was with somebody related to my institution and I said, have you included us in your estate plans? And the response was, oh, you're one of the only two that's going to get everything. And my response to her was, thank you for the trust that puts in this institution. So as we think about it here, where does our trust lie? And I hope our trust lies in God and the people doing the work at this parish. As our rector and stewardship leaders consistently remind us, everything comes from God and everything belongs to God. We are called to be careful and wise stewards of the resources God has given us. Every day, as people, we are encouraged to use our own personal gifts to be Christ in the world. But we also have financial gifts to provide the resources needed for the ministry of this communion of saints and others, now and in the decades that follow us. This is not just during stewardship season for a moment in time when we are scrambling for a couple months here or any other organization, but to steward these gifts throughout our lives, even at the time of our passing. Gift planning is a recognition that stewardship of God's creation is indeed a lifelong endeavor, and even an after-death endeavor. So what does this mean for us today? Thoughtful financial planning means creating a long-term plan to include what happens to your assets when you are no longer around. We will not spend time today going through all those specifics because there are experts out there who can do that a whole lot better than I can, including one sitting right over there. But this kind of gift tends to fall in three different categories. What are called deferred gifts or bequests or use of assets. And a sidebar on assets can include everything from your coat to your jewelry to your chair. And I would encourage you, if any of you have been children who have lost parents and you're trying to figure out what goes on with the stuff in the house, make those decisions. Decide what's going to happen to that stuff, because we're all dealing with stuff. Second is arrangements that pay a donor a lifetime of income in exchange for a gift, and that fits in the annuity side. And again, I'm not going to get into all the particulars. And the third is gifts that protect us for minimized taxes, which Tim has talked about a little bit, but falls in another kind of trust called a lead trust. Again, I'm happy to give you all kinds of information about that, but that's not the purpose today. Focusing on our simplest option, a bequest, I would encourage you to consider where St. Albans ranks for you. Going to that original question, what is really important in your life? Where these places sit in your life and how you plan accordingly. You might think about it this way. When you make your annual stewardship commitment, at that time when we're all pressured to do it in a couple months, would you consider at that time making a commitment to include St. Albans in your estate plans or in your will? Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing if next fall 100 of us said, guess what, I'm actually going to do that for St. Albans. I may not tell you what it is, but I commit to doing it. Might you consider leaving an amount in your estate of a specific amount? Might you consider a percentage? Might you consider just something that says St. Albans is important to me? I don't know what's going to be left, but in working with the people who work on your will with you, what might that look like? The gifts I mentioned, many of which were unrestricted, were woefully helpful here. But there are ways to do an unrestricted or partially restricted gift that says, you know what? I love St. Albans, and in my long-term plans, music is my passion. That's fine. Or capital improvements are my passion. Boilers are my passion. Social outreach is my passion. Preaching is my passion. None of those are something that will not happen here in 50 to 100 years. So that's a way to think about it as well, rather than say, well, here's something I care about. One question that emerges with a lot of frequency: am I too young to think about this? And am I not wealthy enough to think about this? The answer is that the beauty of planned giving is accessible to everyone, no matter what size. No matter what size. It costs nothing up front and allows anyone to make, of any income level, to make a commitment to something that I would say is in their heart. I believe each one of us has a deep spiritual need to be generous in thanksgiving to God. And we hear that over and over here, and we are encouraged to do that. And it's why we are sitting here today. Thinking in the most basic terms, including St. Albans in your will, is to express that thanksgiving and to put that trust in God's hands to serve and sustain the generations of people who will follow us in these pews. Think back to Phoebe Nurse and that little box with $40 worth of gold. As one member of the Phoebe Nurse Society here has said, and I quote, "St. Albans has been a major and transforming presence in my life. Now I pray that my planned gift will be a small part of St. Albans' future." I hope all of us here today will think about the many creative ways we support this place we all know and love. While we haven't addressed all the financial implications thoroughly, or all the options available to you, because there are better experts than certainly I, there are many detailed options for doing that. I would just encourage us to know that at some point, when we are in the great beyond, it doesn't belong to us anymore. And it needs to belong somewhere. What better sense of belonging than this place, or other places with which you affiliate your deep heart? I hope St. Albans will become the beneficiary of a gift no matter what the size. But more importantly, I hope you will find in your prayers and your heart where whatever matters to you most, think about how you are thinking about that in the long term. And it may be your children. That may be it. That's okay. But thinking from the great beyond, what have you left behind for others to benefit from? And from the great beyond, you will be helping a place I believe matters deeply to you, and this place to me. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you both. I mean, if we didn't already say it, I mean, to just say it super clearly, one way that we can love our neighbor from the great beyond is to consider leaving money in our will to St. Albans. And when we think about, these questions, again, sometimes we might begin to start to feel afraid or worried or just really not wanting to think about our death. But the thing about our faith is that it liberates us so that we are not afraid. And so that we can come from a place of generosity and a place of wholeness, a place of peace and a place of love. So that these can be joyful questions. And these can be, ways that we can think about the future, not in an afraid way, but in a hopeful, joyful way. And I think that's been the whole purpose of these talks all along, is to just reframe. How do we think about what is going to happen next? Are there any questions? Yes, Marina.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. Yesterday, in the series that we had yesterday, I could see Diane Smith's name there. And that added to the whole thing, because I remember her, and I remember her courage when she got sick. And even towards the end, she was coming here as frail as she was. And it added to the dimension that we had to see her name there. So I guess that's from beyond, but I think
Yeah.
that's a blessing.
That's a beautiful observation. So Marina attended the talk retreat yesterday led by Father Justin Lanier, who spoke about contemplative prayer and about what a life of contemplation is. And she pointed out that it was Diana Smith, a parishioner who is no longer with us. I had never had the opportunity to meet her, but many of you are nodding your heads because you knew her. And Marina talked about the courage she had when she got sick, and she left some money specifically for the purpose of spiritual growth and formation at St. Albans. And look at the fruits that are happening because of that. And in fact, Father Justin yesterday talked about prayer and the life of prayer, and how in some ways prayer is an opportunity not just to practice dying, but to actually die with Christ. To die with Christ and then become alive with Christ, which is what this is all about. So pretty powerful and amazing. Thank you. Yes.
I have a question. I'm sure Susie. It must be fun to get a surprise request. But how does it impact the institution to know ahead of time that people have plans?
How does it impact the institution ahead of time to know that people have made this plan?
Let me just say this, it helps a lot. It helps a lot. However, let me put the cadre on that. None of us know what's going to be left when we're gone. So having a plan that says, I plan to do this, and letting the institution know is a wonderful thing. I can't plan for it until another day, but it also can be encouraging to others. So it's very helpful to know. A lot of people aren't willing to say what amount that is. But knowing that you're doing something makes a huge difference.
Where do you get that information? Because, like, even on the beneficiaries for my Roth account, I can put a percentage. I don't know what it's going to be. Not the time it happens, but I don't know where to get the tax ID number or anything like that.
That is, where's Roland?
Probably busy doing things.
Roland's being busy. That is the office here that can give you that information. But if not, I will also catalog that question and make sure we get it back out.
Couldn't we just print it in the bulletin, make it easy for people? At the bottom?
Good point. Thank you.
Sorry.
And I
Did everybody hear that question, by the way? Okay.
So maybe this is too simple, so I know. Simply name St. Albans in your will, getting a certain percentage along with all the other charitable organizations. And if they can't look it up, if your executor can't look it up, then that's a problem.
Correct.
Am I, are my expectations too big?
You can actually Google St. Albans Parish Church, Washington, D.C., tax ID, and it'll show up. Thank you, Lucy.
I guess, not a question, but just a comment. I was thinking, I think that Sarah, Tim, and Susie, I think you all mentioned this, but I just want to underscore that something that I thought about with friends over the years and different experiences when loved ones have passed on, that all of this stems from thinking of how to love others, our family members and friends, by I guess to me the basis of this conversation is that we do that, I do that by thinking about it. So that when others are in grief, they have clarity and things are easier for them.
Thank you.
No, yeah. I just wanted to add one more thought, which is the point that you made about how you're not too young to begin to think about this. And I think that's really a helpful thing too, because when you're in my stage of life, you're perhaps thinking about like, okay, how am I going to pay for my kids' college, or how am I going to figure out all of our expenses with paying for the sports, etc., and all of that. But again, I think it goes back to the question of what would I do if I knew that I was going to die tomorrow? And that question can truly reframe everything. And so having that in some way selfish knowledge that all of my wishes, all of my desires for what will happen when I'm gone would be implemented, can be such a great relief. And again, the point is that it can be freeing to live life fully now, to live more fully now with no regrets. And I think that's the point of our faith. So.